All right. We're starting with the 19th verse of the 12th chapter. He said, "You whom I love." Now, this is typical Pauline statement. He's going to lower the boom on them, as it were. He's going to tell them something that they really had rather not hear. And Paul nearly always, I call it his sandwich technique. He will say something good, hit you with the thing that's going to get to the quick, as it were, and then he will say something good again. And you watch for that. He said, "You whom I love should never take revenge on those who wrong you, but leave the field open for God's angel to work in accord with what's written." Now, what?
Field. That's an interesting.
Yes, yes. This is the equivalent of what it says in Greek. Leave the field open is an American colloquialism, but it describes what Paul is saying. He is saying, now think about this, he's saying that so often we get in the way of God's revenging or taking care of something that has harmed us, because we're going to mess it up. We're either going to be too harsh and unforgiving, or slap them across both sides of the face, or something like that, or pray for God to curse them, or we're going to be too easy. See, God's judgment of the severity of a wrong very seldom corresponds to our vision of it. Many times we overreact because we're kind of self-centered. And so the slightest little slight, it really gets down to us. Or we like the person, and so we'll overlook. God doesn't do either thing. God requites people according to the deeds they do. And He will do it exactly metered to the last fraction of whatever He does. And so I like this idea. By the way, when I hit upon that phrase, it was one of those aha moments, yes, because I was trying to get over that idea. I first thought, get out of God's way, or the angel's way, because he says angel here. This is based on the Jewish view that God had a special angel that took care of the vengeance problem. And what?
The hitman.
The hitman. You don't want to meet him in a dark alley, or any place for that matter. But and I would hesitate to know exactly what this means, but I know where it came from, and I don't have any other information. So God He does accomplish things through His angels, through His messengers. But remember, in Psalms it says, the smoke, the fire, the hail, the wind can be the angelos of God, the messengers of God, the angeloi, plural, messengers of God. The idea is that God delegates to other entities and events, because even an event can be an angelos of God. This is especially true in the book of Revelation, where the certain what we call natural events, catastrophes, things like that, are instruments of God's vengeance. In fact, the whole book of Revelation is a promise of God that no matter what opposes the church, we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. William Hendrickson's fine little book, commentary on Revelation, that's the title he chose, More Than Conquerors, because the church was facing the first great empire-wide persecution. In fact, they were in the midst of it. That's the reason Paul was in exile on the island of Patmos. John. And so the church needed reassurance. We need reassurance. People wrong us. People wrong us because we're Christian. Because, I'm going to just use an example. There's a lot of churches where if Randy preached that sermon this morning, he would have to be given answer to the leadership. But it's true. What he taught was something I've been advocating since about 1972 or 73. You know, I told you about getting the good start in Abilene Christian when the first Bible class teacher I had said, the Bible is the story of God and man. It starts with God and man in a garden together, and it ends with God and man in a garden together. And see, I got that early. I got a head start. I've often thanked God for that. That was the first college-level Bible study I ever had. And I said, where has this been all my life? Because I was married and had a baby on the way by then. And I thought I knew pretty well and knew the Bible pretty well. But you know what I found? I didn't know nothing compared to what there is to know. And I'm still pretty ignorant and still learning. I have thoroughly enjoyed translating the New Testament because I think I understand the storyline in each one of the books better than I ever have, and that's a very heartening thing to me. I pray to God that He'll give me enough time. So he says, as it is written, revenge belongs to me alone, says the Lord. I will avenge the wrong done to you. Now, in the Hebrew of this, or both in the Greek New Old Testament, the yous are plural. English is very deficient there, and there's not much way of handling that except saying you all. And that's just a little bit too southern for an American translation.
Paul says it.
Yes, I know. And where he does, I'm very happy. And I add it sometimes when I just know that it's a plural, and the plural is necessary to understand the text. But here it is, plural. And that means all the wrongs done to all of God's people. If you have been wronged, God will take care of it. You don't have to. That's a load. And it is a load. How many of us live lives of anxiety and at less than maximum enjoyment level, maximum productive level, because we are feeling so put upon. You know, the word for be patient with, I translate it literally, put up with. And Jesus several times, I love this, says to his apostles, how long am I going to have to put up with you? And that catches the essence of his feelings about it. It was like a mother He says, how many times have I told you? See how natural and the interrelationship between Jesus and his apostles is? Just like a mother, just like a father. What?
Oy vey.
Oy vey. Oh, the main oy vey in the life of Jesus was just as he was going to ascend to heaven. Do you know what the last words he heard from his apostles? Lord, are you going to establish the kingdom now? And he's, oy vey. But he trusted because he knew the Spirit was coming. Now, when Peter preaches that first sermon on Pentecost, he has the idea of the kingdom down right, because it is yet and not yet. And the idea is, and that yet and not yet is bound up with the fact that the Spirit, we receive the Spirit, and to the extent we are Spirit-led, we are already in the kingdom. That's the difference between the church and the world. The world doesn't have the indwelling of the Spirit, and believers do. So, again, the idea here is you will help yourself immensely if you decide that you will allow God to take care of that. Your life will be happier, your family will be better, your family life, your work life will be better. Just think about it. If you didn't have to worry at all about somebody wronging you, if you just could say, okay, God, take care of that. We had a situation, and I'm not going to share it here, but that we went to Houston for over the weekend, and it was a complicated family type situation. And I found that I was just really uptight about it and didn't have a clue about how I was going to handle it. And it dawned on me one night as I was doing my second part of the day private time with God that, you know, I'm just going to turn that over to Him. It's too complicated for me. And I went right on to sleep. And He did a great job. And it worked out in a way that I would never have expected.
Oh, ye of little faith.
What?
Oh, ye of little faith.
Oh, yes, oh, me of little faith. And so that's the idea here. If you get out of God's way, you will live a better life. See, God loves us, and He desires what's best for us. And if He says, let me take revenge, He's doing it, guess for whose benefit? It's not a load to bear, it's a load to get rid of.
Charles?
What?
I had a Palestinian student once who told me after class that what Americans didn't understand was that you had to take revenge for the wrongs of the past. And I said, but do you understand that creates new wrongs that somebody in the future then has to take revenge for? And his answer simply was yes. And you know, I think that's deep insight to me and the problems of the world and humanity when we try to solve our problems.
Yes, it is. Just think, even in the history of this country, have you ever read anything about the great family feuds? Yeah, the Hatfields and the McCoys, what is it, the so-and-sos and the Beanfields. There's a novel. What?
I get Milagro.
Yeah, Milagro. Milagro and Beanfield War, which is a purely, the last family feud in the United States was in Cass County, Texas. And it produced the Cass County Kid, who was a notorious outlaw. And see, if you do that, you are harming yourself. If you were a Hatfield or a McCoy, by the way, there was a feud in my home county. There's a town in my home county. In fact, spent most of my boyhood life about 2.5 miles south of it. It's CUT hyphen apostrophe N hyphen shoot. Cut and shoot. And it's in honor of a cutting and a shooting that didn't happen. Back about the turn of the century, from 1900s to 2000s, a Seventh-day Baptist preacher came there and held a month-long revival meeting. And the families, there were 2 families there that had been feuding for years. And he got them together, and because they were now believers, they stopped their feuding, at least temporarily. And then he left. And so they were going to build a new Seventh-day Baptist church. And so they got in a squabble about which community it was going to be built in. And they were nearly ready to go at it again. He heard about it. He got a special train, paid for it out of his own pocket, and rushed there. And just in the nick of time, he got there. And they settled it. He mediated. He was mediator. And they settled it. Guess what they did? They put it halfway between. Let me finish. And then they had a big celebration. And when we celebrated the 100th anniversary of the establishment of Montgomery County, Texas, that a man came in and he made a big historical musical out of it. And it ends with a big square dance to the cut and shoot rag. So that's just a concrete example of how much better it is to let God. Our problem is we're like Jonah. See, Jonah, he got angry with God because he said, "You did it again, God. I knew that's what you were going to do, and I didn't want it." We misunderstand about what Job was on. He was unhappy because God forgave this Gentile people when they repented, and he didn't want that. Jonah is really a pattern for much of our life, for you and me. And Paul wants it. Now, Rome evidently was already showing some signs. And in the latter part of the 1st century and all through the 2nd century, the church at Rome was at war with itself. They warred about all kinds of controversies. One of the major ones was, what shall we do with people who under the threat of persecution renounce Christ? And they finally decided that they'd give them one time. They'd welcome back after one time, but they wouldn't let them be leaders or anything. And I've always thought that that's probably when Mark's gospel was written and to whom it was written, because as my Greek translation class saw in Mark, it emphasizes and really harps on the failures of the apostles, especially guess who? Peter. And Peter, even the apostles didn't believe the first proclamation of the gospel. When the Marys came back and said, he's risen, we don't believe you. And that was the capstone. I'm having a little problem with, we won't mention what it is. Maybe if I wet my whistle, it'll help. Okay.
Charles, I've been reading a little bit of Edward Fudge this past week, getting into that. And I really believe that one of the hearts of what he was trying to accomplish in saying about hell, our ideas of hell are all about revenge.
Yes.
And trying to make God have certain revenge over people, making them suffer for eternity.
Yes.
Plus, when I was in Bible college, I went to a seminar by Bill Gothard called Instituting Basic Youth Conflicts. And the whole idea of that was that when we are offended by our parents, father or mother, if we carry that, it will affect the way we grow up and see life. Mm-hmm. We have to resolve those things. Plus, if we see some loved one offended, we take up their offense, even if they make up. We still carry that. And we think that we have a right to carry those things or to do judgment. And those things ruin us and hurt us.
Yes, that's really one of the strange things that you find, that a husband or wife will resent damage or wrong done. I'm going to get this up eventually. I'll tell you what, would you give me just a sip of hot coffee? That'll help.
Got a hairball.
Yeah, and like a cat, I can't get it up. Anyway, the point I want to leave is that feeling the need to get revenge is damaging to the person who feels the need. They won't be happy in nearly anything in their lives. How many times have I counseled people whose life was just a complete upheaval and like a scrambled crossword puzzle and no pieces fit. And it was because they carried especially that feeling of wrong from parents. That's one of the primary things.
I just wanted to add, I've been divorced now for quite a few years, and when the divorce happened, I think it was kind of, I'm going to win, like who's going to get custody of the kids, who's going to get this, who's going to get that. And finally, it came to my mind, nobody wins, everybody loses in that situation. Mm-hmm. And throughout the years now, I've seen, like just with my children and just the whole situation, that essentially everybody lost. Nobody won anything.
Yes. One of the things that you try to do in Christian counseling is turn lose-lose situations into win-win situations. That's one of the basic principles of Christian counseling. And that's the reason that it has to do with this feeling of the need for getting even. Don't get angry, get even. Think of the popular ideas about getting revenge. Revenge is better served cold. That's one that I've heard. What?
In Star Trek, that would be a Klingon proverb.
Well, that. You know, the Klingons are a representation of devilish people. That's the whole. That's the reason that it's so popular. You have the same themes that are biblical. You can see a lot of biblical themes in sci-fi type situation. See, most people that write it don't believe in the Bible, but they believe in the principles, which is one of the strange things. On the way here to the church building this morning, we heard the beginning of a requiem by Verdi, done by the one of the great Westminster choir. And it started out, and the woman who introduced it pointed out that Verdi was not a believer, and yet this requiem type thing, which is really a kind of Ave Maria in a form, is one of the most beautiful things. And so remember this, the principles of the Bible are true, whether you believe in God or not. The only reason God is concerned about whether you believe in Him or not is for your benefit, not His. It's not going to, if you pardon the very down-home expression, it's no skin off of God's nose if you don't believe in Him. He will weep for you as Jesus wept over Jerusalem. He will feel sad for you, but He won't be hurt in any way.
He will honor your decision.
Yes, the only way that God ever was hurt was by His own choice. Think about that.
Mm-hmm. Why have you forsaken me?
Yes. So, see how all of this joins together? The Bible is not just a set of propositions or principles. It's a network of relationships. You think of it, and if you have a network and you change one part of that network, it puts the whole network in jeopardy. Think of that. See, if you introduce a dissonance in your relationship with God by holding to vengeance, then the rest of your life will go out of kilter. It will affect things that you don't even realize. You're liable to get indigestion. I wonder, we talk about people being a pain in the belly, or in other parts of the body that we won't talk about. As Paul said, the parts that we pay more attention to in reality. And so I like to get that idea. I have a mind that thinks in terms of networks. And that has been very helpful to me in studying the Bible, because I've tried to see how each part, as my dad used to say, I got my tongue around my eye teeth and couldn't see what I was saying. And every part affects every other part. That's Paul's teaching to the church when he talks about us being members of one body. And if we are out of joint, to use Hamlet's time is out of joint, oh cursed sprite, I was ever born to set it aright. In that sense, then the whole church is affected. We don't like to think of it that way. You know what? If a member of this class is out of sorts, I can sense it many times. Now, I'm not trying to make you feel like I'm judging you or something. I'm just saying, I don't know why you are, I don't know what's happened, but it affects your participation. Now, I can also sense when something is really good happening in your life. And I rejoice in that. Now, I'm going to be careful about saying this because I don't put myself on that level. But in that one thing, I'm like God. I am happy when the class is happy, working together, excited. I can be sick, ache, bone, or anything, and have a class that's doing that, and I feel healed because I think I am healed by God.
You're blessed when others are blessed around you.
That's right. So, instead of revenge, now, see, the Bible never says don't do something and leave it there. There's something positive to do. Instead, you should do this. If your enemy is hungry, feed him. If your enemy is thirsty, give them a drink. Doing this will be like pouring burning coals on their heads. Now, this is a condescension of God to our humanity. He knows there's part of us that wants to pour burning coals on their head. And he says, you do good to them, and that's the equivalent. And God doesn't always allow that, but there's times when he does.
Isn't this a reflection of God's common grace, that where it says that he causes the rain to fall on the good as well as the evil?
Yes, that's very good.
But isn't that also a reflection that it might have them reflect on their actions and so upset them that they might want to change theirs?
Yes. Now that's good gospel teaching too, is that do your good works so that men seeing them will thank God. In other words, you don't do it for them to feel good about you. You want them to feel good about God. And see how that all ties together. Did you have your hand up?
I did. I was going to say a personal example without going to a great deal of detail, but Jerry McHugh's mother ruined our wedding. You have never seen a soap opera that would compare to what she did to the final point of getting up and running out of the church screaming. Okay, so for a long time after that, thank goodness they lived in Iowa, we were in Texas, so we had that distance. But I took revenge on her through many letters, but I never sent them. And because I knew that I had to do the right thing, right? So I can honestly say that I never was disrespectful to them. I was always gracious to them when they came into our home, but deep down inside, I have to tell you that I harbored revenge. I wanted revenge because I just thought she had so much gall to do what she did. I just wanted to, but I didn't ever send the letters, and I can truthfully say I never was disrespectful or anything.
We have a situation in our family. You won't know who it is, but there's 3 children in the family, and there's the older child is a son. The younger child is a son. The middle child is a daughter. The youngest child, even now that they're grown up and have children of their own, still resents the fact that the older child was the fair-haired boy of the family. And the older child resents the youngest son's getting away with things that his parents wouldn't have allowed him to do. And it's still there. They're both old enough to have their own children. But this comes up at times. And as mediator-in-chief of the family, I get appealed to, and I try to help them see that. Because see, this is sibling rivalry at its worst. And it is, if could only realize that that's as old as Cain and Abel. And that it's not something new. So live with it, Buster. It's not going to go away. You can choose either to be happy and accept it, or unhappy and fight it. But you can't make it go away. And sometimes people need to see the truth that they can.
You know, the different concept of hell,
Mm-hmm.
that, other than, you know, the lake of fire.
Mm-hmm.
I think, you know, deep in my heart, one of the reasons I resist that is because this little revenge thing.
Well, that's exactly what Jesse was getting at. That we do that. That we, as horrible as that idea is, we got a few people we'd like to consign there.
When you look at that, I mean, because I got a list too, everybody does, but I think about what miserable lives those people have now, and it's not going to get any better.
Yes.
You know, and that makes me pray for them.
Yes.
I don't pray that God will, just bless their life with all this good stuff, but I can pray that God will work in their lives and help them to see.
Well, I'll tell you what, if you can do it honestly and can pray for their well-being, that's one of the secrets. I didn't discover that until I was nearly 80 years old in a personal situation.
It can work miracles.
It can. It sure can.
I'm not always good at praying for their well-being,
Mm-hmm.
but I can pray that God will work in their lives.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah, well,
that's an honest prayer.
yes, it is. Notice I said, if you can do it. Faking it won't. Well, there is a sense in which faking it may be a good thing to do if you want to receive the blessing.
I've often thought of the burning coals as a purifying element, just as steel is purified by burning coals. That we're not trying to take pain and revenge against them. We're asking that whatever we do good for them will help purify them.
I heard there's a famous preacher story about an old woman that came to a preacher. She just couldn't stand her husband, and she just poured it all out, and he could tell that she was one that was causing, I don't know, that she was one that was causing the problem. So he said, have you tried putting burning coals on his head? She said, no, I tried boiling water, but it didn't work. Yeah, that's Tennessee mountain talk. Okay. Now here is the punchline. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. You realize that's what God did in the cross. You remember how my illustration of like God is the only being that's big enough and good enough to stamp out the fire of evil by taking it into himself. I picture a mountain lake and somebody throwing a burning torch into that lake. And you know what? That lake will quench that torch without appreciably changing that lake at all. The finest thermometer in the world will not register an increase if you just throw one torch into a mountain lake. There won't be anything. And that's what God, see, that's the reason God didn't want Adam and Eve to eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Word knowledge there means to experience it. And he knew that if human beings experience evil, they become evil. God can experience evil and snuff it out.
You can't handle the truth.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you can't handle the truth. See, some of these things that have bothered us all of our lives, if you get a good biblical perspective of it, makes sense. I've heard many people say, well, why did God worry about them? Because He loved them. He knew what it would do to them. Now, why God put it there, that's for a different day. If you have to, it takes me about 2 hours to explain that. I think I can give a good, reasonable explanation, but that's not for today. All right, that's the whole point. Don't be overcome. To be overcome is just the opposite of being more than conqueror. See? It means more than victors, more than victory. You know what the word Nike means? Victory. The goddess of victory was named Nike. That's the reason they have the shoes. Yeah. Okay, now, chapter 13. Okay, now, I don't know any passage in the book of Romans that's much more controversial than this one, because it has been used and misused countless times. And you have to watch carefully, and we're going to try to do that as we get into it. Every person should be in subjection to the governmental authorities. Now, I took the liberty of putting in the adjective governmental, because Paul uses the word authorities in different ways. He uses them of governmental authorities, but he also uses them of spiritual authorities. Like in high places, he talks about what we would call demonic influences, heavenly battles and things like that. So I wanted us to concentrate on what he's talking about.
So like civil authorities.
What?
Like civil authorities.
Yeah, civil authority. All right. Now, notice what he's saying here. In subjection to. That means not that you necessarily see them as completely right, but that you should not use your Christian faith in order to avoid some responsibilities, especially paying taxes. That's one of the things he's going to mention. We are commanded to pay taxes to Caesar. All these people who in the name of religion don't want to pay any income tax to the government are, in that point, not biblical. Now, notice I was very careful in my words, but it's true. I would not be your teacher and your friend if I didn't say that, because it is a clear teaching of the Bible. There's another one that I wish I could get all believers today to understand. And Paul quotes it when he says bad things about the high priest, you know, when he's being tried in Caesarea Maritima. He says something, you whited sepulcher, and somebody says, you're talking to the high priest. And he effectively says, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know you were the high priest. And then he quotes a passage from the Old Testament. You shall not say evil concerning your leaders.
So it wasn't tongue-in-cheek.
What?
So his response was not.
No, it was not. He honestly felt bad about doing it. And I don't care how you feel about, there's some of them that I would like to drop kick over the goalpost. on both sides of the aisle. By the way, I have stood watching from the visitors' balconies, watching both the House of Representatives and the Senate in session. And it reminds me more of a kindergarten recess sometimes than grown men and women. But because people are just people. They're our politicians are no better and no worse than the general run of people.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Charles. When you think about what the Roman government was doing, what their policies were, what their morals were, you know the church at Rome had to really have differences with that. And
Yes.
Paul is writing to them saying, respect it.
Yes. Here is the thing. There's only one thing worse than bad government. No government at all. If I have made a study of periods of time when there was no government. Take the barbarian invasions of Rome. You take, we come closer to home. You take what went on in the gold fields of California. You go back to the time when San Francisco was rent because into several warring groups, and because they didn't have any central government that could control the people. And there was lynchings, there was shootings, there was rapes, there were just everything. When there is no government authority that people respect, at least give lip service to, then you will see human beings at their absolute worst.
That kind of happened in Iraq.
What?
That happened in Iraq recently.
Yes, it's still happening. One of the things that's happened in Iraq and Afghanistan, and it's because the ruling authorities, bad as they were, did keep some kind of social order. But the problem is, it's much easier to destroy a government than it is to build one. Remember, we destroyed the government of England over the colonies, and we came awfully close to having a series of rebellions. One of them was called Shays Rebellion, which was primarily that caused Congress to decide to have a convention to redo the Articles of Convention. Only they knew they wouldn't write a new constitution. And because when you have competing authorities, you don't have any authority. If you really want to make a study of this, read some science fiction stories about times of anarchy.
Why do you think kids play their parents against each other?
What?
Why do you think kids play their parents against each other?
Yeah, okay. Yes. And that's what Paul means, by the way, when he talks about men, husbands being the head of the family. It's not that they are the lords and masters. They are the ones who have the responsibility for seeing that order is in the family.
There's a respect of the position.
Yes, right. And that we fail. We men fail miserably on that a lot of times, thinking that it's going to be our way or the highway. It's their way or the highway. Okay. Every person should be in subjection to the governmental authorities. You should do this, for no authority can exist without God's permission. Now, I realize that I translated this and added a word or two to get what I believe is it says without God in basically in Greek. But remember, God has two wills. One is his will. What's it? Help me, Jesse. When you what?
Permissive.
One, yes, I know the permissive one. It's the other one. I can't remember. It's his authoritative. It's what he wants done. There are certain things he wants done. There are certain things he allows to be done. And so, all government, since God knows we need it, exists with his permission. Just like a lot of other things exist with his permission that are not always up to snuff, as we used to say.
That's part of the idea of the book of Daniel and the relationship between Daniel and Nebuchadnezzar.
Yeah. Well, it's also, remember what the writer of Judges says about the period of Judges? It's when every man did what was right in his own sight.
Revealed will of God.
What?
Revealed will of God. God's revealed will and his permissive will.
That's close, but that's not the word that theologians use for it. It'll come to me about 1 o'clock in the morning if I'm awake. I'm not going to stay awake till I remember. But I wanted to get over that this is his permissive will. Any particular government, now notice, because Paul is talking here about the principle of civil government. He's not putting his stamp of approval on any individual civil government, because Paul would be the first to know that there are good governments and bad governments. There are good politicians and there are bad politicians. What we need is not less politics, but better politicians. That's my.
So the government of the United States is not necessarily the only godly government.
Well, it's not godly.
Right.
Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Never has been.
No, we make a mistake when we read. Now, we have been blessed by God. I'm the first person to realize that. In fact, we've been blessed much more than we deserve. And we need to feel that gratitude for it. But it doesn't mean that God has a special place, for United Statesers.
It's not like with the Cowboys. Tom Landry had that open spot in the stadium so that God could look down on the Cowboys.
Yeah, okay. I've heard that. Anyway, because like I say, we've had good governments, we've had bad governments. We have good this and that. Okay. The authorities that now exist have been appointed by God. Now, this is to nail home the idea that, by the way, I've talked too long.